All right, welcome to Cwic Show. My name is Greg Mattson, and I am your host. In this episode, we're going to talk about the Olympic opening ceremonies. I know this has been hashed out. I'm going to give you my take on this. I'm going to talk about the boxers, the male boxers that are boxing in women's boxing, and we're going to talk about the Pride movement, the Pride agenda against Christianity. This is what we need to parse out. This is not about someone who has same-sex attraction being antithetical to Christianity. This is about a movement. It's about an ideology, and it is antithetical to Christianity. And so much of our culture has become antithetical to Christianity. I want to talk about Fathom the Good. This is a sponsor of ours. They have high school curriculum for homeschooling. Our country now has an obsession with identity, race, gender, sexual orientation, and our future really does hang in the balance. Fathom the Good is uniquely designed to address the problem of radicalization. It distinguishes between the good philosophy behind the American founding from today's postmodern and woke confusion. Learn more about it. Take a look at some sample courses. Go to fathomthegood.com. Now, in regards to the opening ceremonies, there are a number of different takes that have been made on this. Some people are saying, no, the Last Supper scene was not meant to be a Last Supper scene. It was about Dionysus. It was about a feast. That's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And you know that the IOC and the director at first said that it was not the Last Supper once they really had a lot of backlash that came, but it was. There's this little thing that becomes like a bunch of gnats, unfortunately, for people who want to lie, and that is called social media. And when you go back and you look at a number of the participants in that scene, you see their social media, and you see that, yes, they were mocking, not just giving a representation, but a mocking of the Last Supper. Remember, this is a religious icon for many people, whether they call it the Eucharist, communion, the sacrament. This is a very holy and reverent narrative and event in Christianity. And the idea of this Pride movement, the agenda, is to queer the Last Supper. By queering, I mean pull it out of its current meaning and make it so that it is fringe. It's turning it on its head. This is what queer theory is all about. So instead of something that is supposed to provide order and reverence, right, it is taking away order by having men dressed as women, as an example. Instead of an order of family that you would have in an order of God, you have orgiastic movements from the members of this Last Supper. And even a little bit of a tinge of pedophilia, as you had a young girl being danced with and walked away with by one of the men. It's absolute mocking, and that is intentional. That is how you break something down. It goes to the core of not only Christianity as a religion, but it's going after the core of a Western civilization. And here you have on one of the largest stages in all of the West and all of the world, this mocking and breaking down of this Western Christian iconic. And I know there's a lot of Christianity in the East. I'm not saying there's not, but this is France, right? It's the West. And it's people within the West, within a Christian, Judeo-Christian values and Western civilization that are trying to break it apart from within. So at first they're trying to deny it. Here you have a headline, Olympics opening ceremony. Artistic director says controversial scene not inspired by the Last Supper. Again, unfortunately, social media doesn't lie in that regard. You go back and you see what was posted, and you have things like one of the actors who says, oh yes, the New Gay Testament. Then, of course, one of the other presenters there, a French drag queen known as Piche, I hope I'm saying that right, confirmed completely that the whole thing was about the Last Supper. There might have been a little bit of Dionysus in there, but it's about the Last Supper. It's a mocking of the Last Supper. It's better put, really, when you understand the underlying pushes against this, the adversarial pushes against Christianity. It's about queering the Last Supper. So the pedophilia, the tinge of pedophilia, the orgiastic movements, the drag queens, it is all about breaking down that order. What's funny is that a lot of people will still say, Christians will still say, no, it's not about the Last Supper. It was never about the Last Supper. They'll follow up on that as if they don't completely recognize what it is. It's like they almost want to put a veil over their own eyes and deny this. In some way that I don't know how that works with people. It's like maybe it makes them feel better somehow. And really, for me personally, it's not a matter of even outrage on this. I'm not outraged by it. But I think we need to be aware of what's happening. This is, again, the largest stage there is right now in the world. And others will say, okay, it was the Last Supper, but it's okay, right? If you don't like that they're doing this and doing their representation of this, then you're homophobic. As if in any regard you're breaking down the order of Christianity, the reverence, the holiness of that event, of the Last Supper, then you must be homophobic. It's disgusting to me. I cannot believe that people will do this. It's kind of ridiculous. It's almost laughable to a certain point. People that still want to grab onto this idea of tolerance as a positive virtue, regardless of what it is, as if the virtue of tolerance is above all things, even truth. Putting this out on the main stage of the opening ceremonies of the Olympics, we've obviously moved quite a bit ago, right? We've moved from tolerance to acceptance to mainstreaming to now advocating and preaching. When you have Christian individuals who are advocating for the right of the drag queens and the LGBTQ community to go out and give their artistic approach to the Last Supper, well, sure, they have the right for it. But it is mocking a sacred scriptural event about Jesus Christ. And to not see that is to put blinders on. And it's a perfect example of how this movement, this agenda works, right? Same-sex individuals, as an example, are not antithetical to Christianity. They're just not. There are some people that have those feelings. They deserve love. They deserve an arm around them. They deserve support. They deserve outreach. They're as valuable as any other child of God. But what you see up here is not about tolerance and accepting and love to an individual. Look how far tolerance has brought us today. It's about an agenda. And the pride movement, the pride ideology, identitarianism, is antithetical to the doctrine of Christ. This is a perfect example. I mean, is anyone surprised that the elements of pride are mocking the Last Supper? You shouldn't be. So you can parse this out. You have the individuals, many of whom do not grab onto this ideology and this movement, right? Individuals from the LGBTQ community, we'll call it, right? I have issues talking about it that way, but identifying those individuals and separating them from the movement. There is a Geist, there is a progressive movement that is antithetical to the doctrine of Christ and antithetical to the order of the family. And that's what this was about. This is very similar to a postmodern movement of literature, right, and words, changing the idea of what equity is, as an example. Changing the idea of what tolerance is. And here you're changing the meaning. See, these are stories. They're accounts that have a very specific meaning to individuals. And the more that you can mock those things and queer those events, the more you can break down that meaning, remove its reverence, and remove its position in the minds of those that adhere to it. So it's a matter of, we're going to queer the Last Supper, but really overall it's about queering Christianity. Now, just to cap this off, I typed in opening ceremony, Last Supper, New Testament, and here's what Google gave back. And this is why people still repeat this kind of thing. You think that, well, Google isn't that influential. Social media isn't that influential. This is what people see and then regurgitate. It says the opening ceremony's artistic director, Thomas Jolly, confirmed that Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper was not his inspiration for the performance. Right? They've walked that back. They've already changed that. This is from 3 days ago, after they had already walked it back. While the theatrical opening ceremony at the 2024 Paris Olympics brought memorable moments, one scene from the performance has prompted mixed reactions. And then you still have, look at what it brings you up afterward. And this is from today.com. Why would Today here be at the top? Well, because its headline is Olympics opening ceremony tableau sparks controversy in Christian community. And then you get here again, the opening ceremony's artistic director, Thomas Jolly, confirmed that Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper was not his inspiration for the performance. So you see how they control the narrative. Now, I want to go over to the IOC's portrayal guidelines under gender equal, fair, and inclusive representation in sport. And this is not only, this is really where we're starting to get into the boxing story here. Let's take a look at some of its contents here. Going into part 1, the context, recognizing stereotypes and changing the cliches, reframing the narrative, which is exactly what they're trying to do, just like Google, sport as a driver of equality and inclusion. Everything has to fall into DEI, right? Everything has to fall under wokeism. Nothing can escape it. A collective responsibility and opportunity. You have a responsibility to be activated, to preach and advocate for this, like many Christians are doing. Now here again, and this is them dictating language. This is very important. It reminds me of Jordan Peterson in Canada, right? When he would not go along with the law in Canada that says when someone asks you to use their pronouns, you have to use them. You are compelled in your speech to use their pronouns. Right? This is, not a compelling thing, but you're going to get shamed pretty hard if you don't follow this. So they want you to avoid these things. This is how they're stripping this away. I've talked about this before. At the higher level, which they've already done and accomplished very well, is gender. Right? Well, you might be born with a man's body, but if you feel as a woman, you want to be a woman, then you are a woman. You're not a female, but you're a woman. And so we're going to break that part down first, right? So gender is what you feel. And then biology and sex is what your body is. Of course, that's now going away. Because if you ask someone who is a man, a male, who is living as a woman, are you male or female? They're going to say female usually. And the media is going to say this is a female. And you even get this with the idea of what is your assigned gender or even your assigned sex at birth, right? It's to break this down completely, this order, just like the Last Supper. So here you get what their recommendations are on this. And they're, I don't know what the punishments are of this. Are you still going to be able to cover this if you don't follow this as they want you to? I don't know. But here you have terms to avoid: born male, born female, so you have to get rid of those also. Biological male. See, they don't want you to say male or female, right? If they are XY chromosome, you don't say biological male. Genetically male, genetically female, you have to erase all of it. That is the goal of this. It is a goal against personal identity, not what you feel, but what you actually are. Here's some more. Don't use identify as. He, she is a transgender or the transgenders. So you're getting very, very limited on how you describe something or are able to talk about something like the boxers. Sex change or post-operative surgery. I'm sure these things are triggering, I suppose. Transsexual. Now, they don't even want you to use transsexual, an older term originally used in medical settings. It's interesting because in addition to this, appropriate terminology is fundamental to respectful coverage. That includes, for instance, the use of correct name, pronouns, and or terms, as well as appropriate imagery. So if you don't change your communication and your language, there's going to be a problem. And you think about how this works. I mean, this completely pulls us out of a reality and puts us into feelings and dysphorias. What do you identify as? What are your pronouns so that I can actually communicate with you? It gets to a point of being preposterous. There's no common knowledge. There's no social consciousness on order and gender, something as simple as man and woman. The agenda is really coined by Michel Foucault, the postmodernist, the pride agenda, the queering agenda, which, by the way, what queer theory is, right, it's always going on to the margin. Those that are gay, for example, today are not really looked at as queer. They're not queer enough. And queer theory says, look, we need to keep pushing out to the margin continually. So you end up with this continual spiral of getting more and more and more on the fringe as things become more mainstreamed. But Michel Foucault said this very telling thing, this phrase, right, where he says, and think about this, the soul is the prison of the body. The soul is the prison of the body. It is the very opposite of throwing off the natural man, as an example. It is my body is what needs to rule myself, not my soul, not my spirit. It is not a matter of conquering my body and my passions and bridling my passions, but it's suppressing my soul, my spirit, and unbridling my body. It is antithetical to Christianity. And this is why it is also antithetical to the family. The traditional family requires a man, and a woman, right, to create children and to create a family. And that means even within heterosexuality, there is an order against adultery because it falls outside of that order. But queering, right, queering these things, taking the attitude that the soul is the prison of the body, does the exact opposite of this. And it is a lot like I talk about the difference between liberty and liberation. Liberation is liberating yourself from the chains of the sexual mores and the sexual constraints of what would be a family, a traditional family. And those that write about this, those that are the authors and those that carry the torches for queer theory and gender ideology, they push specifically the ideas of adultery. They push the ideas of queering your identity and all of these things that pull you away from the order of a family. That is an agenda. It is not just tolerating an individual. There is a widespread agenda, especially throughout the West, that is growing very quickly and being adopted, that is antithetical to Christianity and to the family. And by the way, it's being adopted by Christianity. And I believe we're going to see that more and more and more. Watch the SBC, right? The Southern Baptist Convention, the largest Protestant denomination in the country, in the U.S. Watch where it goes. It is primed for some very big changes in the near future. So into the boxing, I see the exact same people that are saying that the Last Supper was not the Last Supper, or, yeah, it's the Last Supper, but if you don't like the presentation, you're homophobic, are also saying that the two male boxers are women. They were born women. They've been raised as women. So let them box. Okay. The problem is they're not women. Just because someone assigns them a specific gender or they've been brought up in a certain way, there are some parents out there right now that are bringing their kids up as cats because they want to act like a cat. And actual schools that will put a litter box at the school for those that want to act like a cat. They're not cats. You could have a baby born and have the doctor say, this is a cat, and be reared as a cat their entire life. They're not a cat. Imane Khalif, and I don't know if I'm saying that right. If I'm not, I apologize. But Imane Khalif, right? The boxer who boxed first of the two males that's boxing in women's boxing and beat up on the Italian woman boxer, pounding her in the face, where she is scared for her life, as she said, right? He is not a woman. Just as a kid pretending to be a cat is not a cat. And to put them in the same ring with a woman, especially in something so physical, is irresponsible for our society, and it's a lie. And it removes the opportunity for those real women to receive medals. Both of these guys, right, the other male that is boxing in women's boxing just today secured a place with a medal. He'll get one of the medals and will therefore displace one of the actual women from getting a medal, an Olympic medal. That is ridiculous. But it's such a telling outcome of where our society is and what we have accepted, what we have tolerated, and who we're becoming. And there has to be a tipping point at some place, right? At some point, there has to be a tipping point. I don't know what that is. But as you break down this order of family, as you break down this order of identity, as you break down the cores of Western Christianity and its civilization, it's not going to hold up for very long. I think a lot of people really sense that. But hey, all's well in Zion. And I'm just a fearmongerer, right, as I'm told oftentimes. Mani Khalif, by the way, was not just, previously, he was banned from the International Boxing Association because he's a male. Now, the first, of course, this is how it always happens, right? We were told that his testosterone levels were too high, making things very vague. But that's not what happened. Someone reported erroneously, I'm going to guess on purpose, because that's not what it was. Istvan Kovacs, the European Vice President of the World Boxing Organization, and the former Secretary General of the International Boxing Association, told the Hungarian press that he had warned the International Olympic Committee about males participating in women's boxing as early as 2022. It's happening all the time, by the way. But that nothing was done. He made a statement just a couple days ago saying that it had been known as early as 2022 that Khalif was a biological male. Sorry, IOC, I broke your rules on the terms. He says specifically, the problem was not with the level of Khalif's testosterone, because that can be adjusted nowadays, but with the result of the gender test, which clearly revealed that the Algerian boxer is biologically male. He has XY chromosomes. And that's now where we're down to, right? We start with man and woman with gender, break that apart, and then we come down to sex, to male and female, and we're in the middle of breaking that apart. And then what makes you male or female? It's the chromosomes, XX or XY chromosomes. So now you have some of the headlines on the boxing fiasco, and it is a fiasco, that call it something like the chromosome crisis. And if you follow the agenda, you follow the pattern on this, you're eventually going to have to remove the XX and XY chromosomes from your vocabulary. Because everybody will know that if you're XX, you're a woman. And if you're XY, you're a man. And there's a discrepancy there. And that is the agenda. Make everyone the same. One big glob of the same thing. Not the same as Christianity would say, where you are assimilating to Christ and to Christian values and becoming one with him, right? But it's a perversion of it. We become one of ourselves, right? All one glob of ourselves. No disparity, no differences. One more remark that is very interesting on the boxing. Kovacs stated that he had recently talked to a former women's world champion who bitterly remarked that in modern women's boxing, there is a 20% chance that one of the athletes will suffer a testicular injury. Can you see what's happening there? It is going to be erased. Women's boxing will be erased. Who is going to keep competing? If there is 1 out of 5 that are men right now, or maybe there's a little bit fewer, maybe it's 1 in 10, maybe it's 1 in 20. But as that number continues to increase, and there are men fighting in women's boxing, and they're winning all of the medals, who is going to continue with this? And with the IOC supporting it, they've known for a long time that these two boxers are male. And they brought them in anyway and ripped people apart as haters for saying that they are male and that they shouldn't be boxing women. And this is where we're at, right? This is where we're at. So I want to make it clear, right, so that we understand this. There is a breakdown. There is an agenda, a pride agenda against Christianity. That does not mean that individuals who are homosexual, lesbian, transgender, etc., are antithetical to Christianity in their opinions. Or if they have same-sex attraction, that they are automatically evil or something, or they are antithetical to Christianity. That's ridiculous. But there is a movement, there is an ideology that comes from, quite frankly, the academies and certain philosophies of men that have pushed this for a very long time. And as we send now 40% of our kids through the university system in the United States, most of them are receiving some type of indoctrination into this ideology that is antithetical to Christianity and to the family. I think we need to be very aware and not put our heads in the sand and consider that people who have an issue with mocking such something so reverent. Imagine if this was the Prophet Muhammad and the angel Gabriel, and that it was being queered, and that it was done with drag queens and orgiastic dancing. Would those same Christians have a problem with that? How interesting it is that you can't protect your own religion. And again, I'm not talking about just being outraged. It's not an issue of even being outraged. Maybe you are, maybe you're not. I don't know. But wow, be aware of truth. Don't stick your head in the sand. Don't go along with all of the finger pointing from the great and spacious building. If we can use clear thinking and parse these things out, I think we can see what's going on here. Thanks for listening.